ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ronald Valenti.
Pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Joe.
Of course, it's very good to have you back, and a very important and necessary episode.
Yes.
Just a little bit of context. We are in the process of revealing the proposed budget at the Board of Education meetings. And at the last one, we did get through the entire presentation.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, and then today, we're going to be going over basically the budget presentation again in a little bit more of an in-depth way, but in a very succinct and transparent way for all of you, the community, to hear again, in case you missed it. So we could get right into it, I guess.
Let's get rolling.
So let's start with the big picture, the big overview and outline of what the budget will look like.
Yeah, this is the third budget that I presented as a superintendent here in Eastchester. And every year I have the same non-negotiables. Number one, we have to stay below the cap. That means that we don't want to go over 2%. It's a very important aspect that a community needs to know. State law does ask you to stay below the cap unless you're able to secure 2/3 of the voters in a community. Last year, 4 districts did try that, by the way. Harrison being one of our closer neighbors, and they were successful. Chappaqua, a little further north, was not successful. Scarsdale and Rye City, closer to us, were successful. But here in Eastchester, we've managed to find ways to cut in certain areas, increase monies available for resource allocation, and manage to stay under the cap. So, number one, every resident should know that we're not here terrorizing your pocketbook, okay? We'll be at 1.9% in full disclosure, and we're allowed under the law to include excludables. And now, what is an excludable? Well, we're involved in a major capital project, so your borrowing costs, et cetera, debt service, those are considered excludables. Those would be another 0.5%. So to be perfectly transparent, we are at 1.9 under the cap, 0.5 excludables, total, you add them together, 2.4%. So the average taxpayer now says, well, that's interesting. I like what you've said, I think, because you're under the cap. What does that mean in my pocketbook? All right, how far into my pocket are you reaching? So let's talk some real numbers from that point of view.
Absolutely.
We need to go to our assessment. All right, we always start with, what is your home assessed at? Now, $8,500 is this year's current assessment, and that's from the town. We don't make that number up. That's a real number based on assessables throughout the entire town of Eastchester. That has grown very slightly as an average, very clear as an average. It is now $8,558. So that isn't too much of an increase. It's about a $58 increase in the actual assessment on an average home. What does that mean in terms of an increased tax rate based on the information I just shared with you? It means that the homeowner of a home on or about $8,500, $8,600, will be paying $104 more next year than he or she is paying this year. All right? Now, if my home is valued at half of that number, then the increase is about $52. If my home is double $8,500, let's say $17,000, $18,000, well, then you can do the math, and it'll be approximately a $200 increase in your taxes, which still is within a relatively low range. So I think the first important message is that we're not rating the taxpayer. We're not abusing the taxpayer. In fact, I think we're very fair to the taxpayer, and yet we want to deliver the best programs that, again, the taxpayers deserve, because it does maintain real estate values in the community, and it does make Eastchester a very attractive place to live in. Okay? One point that I thought of while you were introducing me is that while this could be helpful explaining the budget to a taxpayer, if there were a number of taxpayers who wanted to ask questions, either in a live podcast or send questions to you, Joe, and then I would answer them, whether the taxpayer wanted to be identified or not is their prerogative, we could do a further session on a Q&A and, be able to either go live with the taxpayer for a conversation or answer the questions that are being raised. But number one, let's stipulate that we're below the tax cap, which is allowable. We have a balanced budget, which is very important. Now, people say, well, why do you say that? Well, the federal government does not necessarily. So we make sure that the budget we're proposing, which is $110.9 million, in terms of revenue, we actually are getting those monies, and we will not spend a penny more than $110.9 million for next school year. So that's the commitment we have to make as well. The last item that's a not negotiable is that we are introducing program enhancements and improvements K-12. So whether you're the most vulnerable kindergartner, first grader, there'll be new programs for you. For example, a school counselor at Waverly. Waverly is the only school right now that does not have a school counselor. Next year, if this budget is approved, Waverly will, okay? Waverly will have much more, but I'm just offering the school counselor as an example. Conversely, at the high school level, we're adding some teachers in order to make advanced placement courses more accessible, not just to those students who are eligible for AP, but certain students who we're encouraging to take AP. We're pushing them to go for higher, more challenging courses, including some special needs and ENL youngsters. So that's very important, that K-12 spectrum, and there'll be programs right through that we could talk about over the course of the budget and the podcast that we're going to have.
Excellent. Well, that's an incredible introduction. Thank you, Dr. Valenti, for providing that. Just a couple quick points.
Sure, yeah.
This is very transparent, and kudos to you for putting it at the start of every budget presentation that you've ever had, because yes, people's pocketbooks and wallets are at the forefront of their thinking. So
you bet.
Absolutely. So it's very good to see this. And the possibilities can certainly be explored for some type of Q&A or whatnot. If we're able to receive the questions, we can even do a part 2 with the best selected questions, or maybe even the most asked questions.
Would love to do that, yeah.
No, that's certainly great. But yes, as we continue to keep moving along, yes, let's take a deeper dive into the estimated revenue and the estimated expenses.
Sure. So on the revenue side, and again, our local levy, which means the taxpayer, which is what we began this conversation with, they really generate the most money. It's about 85% of the total budget. And that would be about $84 million as it works out in this budget. In addition, we'll be getting some state aid, approximately $17.7 million. So that's the next large component. It's about another 8%. And then the remainder of the budget would be other revenues that are generated from the county sales tax, tuition from other districts, et cetera. There's one area we're very proud of that I want to point out, that because we've managed our cash well, and the fact that we're in the midst of a bond, which means we have more cash available, we have really taken full advantage of the higher interest rates. And we're estimating for next year that even though the rates are slightly declining, the 10-year Treasury is still in the 4.3% range. So we're still looking at in the neighborhood of 4.5, in the range of where we think it will continue to accrue interest. We're estimating another $1.5 million in interest. Now, what's the context for that number? Well, the context is when I first arrived here, with the monies we had and the way we were investing them, we were only estimating $250,000. So if we're able to generate 1.5 million, now we've taken a major leap because we do have higher interest rates. We can't take credit for that. But we also, through the generosity of the taxpayer, have a bond referendum. So there are additional monies that we do have, and by investing them in a very careful way at the highest rates that we're able to get, then clearly we're able to generate interest, which is a substantial portion of the budget, the revenue end. And in effect, when you look at that, as I do each year for the last 3 years, this is the third year that we're able to do it, we do a bow to the Fed, and hopefully those rates will stay up. Now, not all people in the marketplace share the same view that we do on higher interest rates, but obviously it does help the taxpayer from this perspective. On the expenditure side, we can talk more about that when we get into the programs themselves.
Please.
But what I'm very proud about in this budget, I don't want to get too deep into the numbers, but that when you look at a budget, you divide it into 3 parts. You have what you call your administrative part, you have your capital projects, and then you have your program. Now, what does program mean? Program means everything you're doing for children in the classroom. Your teachers, your materials, your supplies, your contractual costs, your equipment, furniture, everything that you're putting in for the children is your program, all right? Teacher salaries, benefits, etc. We are at 75 to 78% there, which is a nice place to be. You want that to be at the higher end as part of 100%. At the other end, the administrative, the money you're investing in central administrators, building administrators, other types of administrators, costs for administration, BOCES costs, that you want to keep lower. You don't want a lot of administrative overhang in your budget. So we managed to get that to about 7.5%, 8%. Your capital is right in the middle. That's your busing. That's your keeping your rooms clean, all of your custodial work, your maintenance work, etc. And that's generally in the range of about 15 to 16%. So the higher you go on program, the lower you go on administrative, the better you're demonstrating a budget that is truly in the interest of the children and putting programs where they belong.
Really quickly, just 2 questions. That was outlined beautifully. And I really enjoy this too, because I'm learning a lot, because a lot of the time too, when you're presenting it on the board and whatnot, all the information's there, but this direct conversation
allows for back and forth. And yeah, sure.
2 questions I had. Well, one of them actually what you answered. I didn't know if teachers fell under administrative or programs, and they fall under programs.
They do. They do. The only folks who fall under administrative would be all of your building principals, your assistant principals, your district-wide administrators, your assistant directors, central administrators, assistant superintendents, superintendent, etc.
And I don't want to jump the gun because I do know that we're going to get to it at the end, but technology. Is technology programs or capital?
Technology is programs. In the first instance, it's your 2600 code, so it's servicing children in the classroom. But it is a bit of capital as well in the sense that it's part of the bond. So there are some elements that we're funding through our capital funding in terms of the work that we're doing. But right now, most of it is being done in a combination between the bonding that we have and the budget that we have, the technology. And we'll get into that very shortly. Right. We're going to show you in the budget, we have a slide, what have we done in the past, what are we doing in the present, and what do we think we could do in the future. And then we have a slide, if there were to be additional bond referenda or a repair reserve fund, there is about $10 to $11 million in technology that still has to be done. Don't forget the current bond that the voters generously passed some years ago did address important areas. Infrastructure is very important, right? Safety, security, very important. So those things are being done now, and they're critical. The air conditioning, critical elements. But it did not get into the classroom. And if you want to be in the 21st century, in terms of your classroom furniture, in terms of your classroom technology, in terms of rooms that have mobile furniture and the full range that you have in this particular lab and every classroom in the district with respect to smart boards, et cetera, Apple computers, et cetera, devices for all of our students. Now you're talking about a much larger investment. And then there's a lot of work to be done behind the walls, so to speak, in the cabinets, the cabling. And it's not exciting from one point of view, but it's critical. The PA system, for example, throughout all the schools needs upgrading. Cabling, and so that our students don't have to sit at a computer and wait 5 seconds, 7 seconds, 10 seconds for certain information or data. We'd love to see it within a second or two, that the immediacy of the information. So there are improvements that could be made for learning, and we could talk about them as well.
Oh, yeah, we will absolutely get to it. And it's important to highlight, too, that those improvements are happening. We're seeing the effects
right now.
of them.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right.
If anyone had any reservations or doubts about the bond project, I wish they could tour the school to see how much construction, with the contractors and what's happening.
Every board meeting I attend here, I have to walk past several workers up in the ceiling.
But that's a good thing.
That's
because,
good.
Yeah,
Sure.
The air conditioning, the HVAC's coming in, and we could maybe show this at the end too, but I actually want to include this in the edit because I remember last year at the board meeting, people were asking about some of the, what the lift would look like with technology.
Right.
And Luis and Rob showed the picture of what the cabinets look like. So I'm actually going to incorporate this in the edit. I want to cut to right now the picture in the cabinet. And in the edit, it'll play right now. So ladies and gentlemen, what you're looking at is one of the cabinets, a before and after. And this is some of the stuff that we have to do behind the scenes that Dr. Valenti is referencing regarding technology and the stuff that you just don't see on the surface. So,
exactly. Yeah. Good.
Let's continue. So we are at...
You want to do a walk through the enrollment?
Absolutely. That would be great.
So what is the story on enrollment? And by the way, before I go too far down that road, we have a series of letters that we're putting out. I estimate about 7 of them, superintendent's messages. So we're looking at a number of ways that the voters and the residents can access information. This podcast, maybe a future one, Q&A, the superintendent's messages that are on the website and are accessible to all the voters and residents to view, and then public meetings. And we'll look at those in the last slide, the timeline for future public meetings on the budget. We stream them if you can't make a particular meeting or you want to watch it from home, or if you want to come, you're certainly welcome. They're all held in the library. But every voter and resident is going to have enormous opportunity to touch, feel, and understand this budget through every way we have to share it, including social media.
Great.
So on enrollment, let's start at the elementary level. But before we do that, let's talk district enrollment, all right? We commissioned a study about 3 years ago when I arrived here with Suffolk BOCES. They're the experts in 10-year analysis of enrollment. And the short story is that they projected Eastchester, like many other districts throughout the state and the nation, would have a slightly declining enrollment going over the next 10 years. So we were over 3,050. And right now, as of today, we were at 2,954. And so that's about 100 fewer students, and it's going to continue into next year and over the next several years. So lower enrollment is in the future. And that's because of the demographics. families are having children later, and fewer families are having children. So you put those factors together, and the algorithm translates into fewer students. So that's what I call the normal churn, all right? We also are very intentional about enrollment, and we have found a number of students who are coming to Eastchester who are not Eastchester residents. Now, under state law, that's not allowable, and we have been removing both regular and special ed students over the last 3 years who are here illegally, and that number totals on or about 10, a total of 10 students. So when you put together your normal churn, your demographic decline, and the fact that we're intentionally removing students who should not be here, we're looking in the neighborhood of 2,900 students next year, district-wide.
Relative to, what is it at now?
Relative to 2,954 now. So you're looking at about another 50 fewer students. So let's take it now by school. Waverly has always been 400 pupils or more since I've been here and prior to my coming. Next year, we're projecting 380. We have an incoming class estimated, kindergarten is about 190. We know we have a current kindergarten class which has stayed at 190 for almost the entire year, so we're estimating it will be 190 next year. So right there, we're able to reduce a position. So we have 19 positions today. We only need 18 positions next year. Now, let me also say no one is losing their job. We have a lot of openings that we have to fill. So everyone currently employed in Eastchester who the district would like to keep for next year will have a job next year. But there will be one less position at Waverly in classrooms, and we'll have a very good teacher-student ratio. I think what families really want is there a good ratio? And what does that mean? Get it as close to 20 or 21, particularly at the earliest grades, and then you allow a little bit of latitude, 22, 23, as you go into second, third, fourth, and fifth grade. In Ann Hutch, we have some movement of population, and so we're estimating in Ann Hutch that we're going to be increasing 2 positions. One at the lower level, second, third grade, and then one at the fifth grade level in order to accommodate departmentalization. Now, departmentalization works best when you have even sections. That's for our fifth graders. So we'd like to have 6 sections at Ann Hutch and 6 at Greenvale. And that allows for a teacher to teach several sections of either ELA or math and allows students the opportunity to work with a particular teacher in a particular subject area, which is now training them for what they're going to experience in middle school where we are departmentalized. So we've put departmentalization into fifth grade for a couple of reasons. We think it gets to a teacher's expertise. We think it helps with our performance on statewide exams. And we think it helps prepare students as they go forward for middle and high school, all right?
I know we have a ton to get to. I do just want to comment because I believe I filmed something on departmentalization since I've been here, but I will just say personally, that's a grand slam. When I was a student here, one of the most difficult transitional periods that I ever had was from the 5th grade to the 6th grade. And the 5th grade, I felt the way the model was did not prepare me at all for, okay, we're not holding your hand anymore, you're on your own. So I can attest that the departmentalization it's necessary.
It is. And I'm glad you introduced that and interjected that into the conversation. It is important.
Absolutely.
To wrap up the enrollment at the elementary level, I did discuss Ann Hutch. Let me say briefly, at Greenvale, it will be a net gain of 1 teacher, again, based on the departmentalization argument. So when you tumble the numbers, we have 1 fewer teacher at Waverly. We have a net gain at the 2 and 1 at the other elementaries, so it would be a net gain of 2 elementary positions for next year. When you go to the middle school, we're estimating only a slight increase in enrollment. So we're going to stay in the 700 range, and we're not increasing any particular staff or classroom there. But we can talk about other additions that we're looking at the middle school. And finally, at the high school will again stay in the 900 plus range. Not much difference there either, a slight decline. And so we're basically going to be keeping the same staffing arrangement.
Really quickly, if people are looking at the numbers, what would constitute or qualify as a breaking of a bracket, if you will, with the population? Because I'm just looking at the numbers right now. So the middle school, we're gaining 9 students. The high school, we're losing 10. How much would have to be gained or lost in order for the needle to be moved to either add or get rid of positions?
Well, I would say if it's in the neighborhood of 25 or more, now you could be talking about an entire section.
Gotcha.
All right, so right now we have 10 sections at the middle school, grades 6, 7, 8, total of 30 sections. If the total number of students went down, then you might have to look at 9 sections or some way of doing it with 8, because that works best in multiples of 2. We do teaming. So 25 to 40 students could be a magic number at the middle school for any decrease in current staffing. At the high school, where you have a slightly different arrangement, you don't have teaming, you have strictly departmental. There, 25 fewer students could mean 1 less English class. For example, if today I have 200 students coming into English 9, and I want to put 20 in a section, bingo, I have 10 sections. If I have 180 students coming in from the 8th grade in a future year, I can do that same 1 to 20 ratio with 9. So that's where there would be a reduction of 0.2 or 1/5 of a teacher.
Great. Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I do feel that, for community members, parents, that could be a question of, again, what would qualify as a changing of adding or, getting rid of a position.
So on the enrollment, we're going down about 1.9% for next year. And I did explain, I think, why we were slipping.
Yes, you did. You mentioned that in the beginning, or a couple minutes ago, which is great.
Any more questions that you have on that?
Just as long as you went over sensible adjustment to enrollment dynamic, as long as...
Yeah, well, we think what we're doing is rather sensible. Our teacher-student ratios at the elementary level I think are in the sweet spot of 1 to 21, 1 to 20. That is a very good place to be, particularly at the K-1, and then, of course, at the lower elementary grade levels, grades 2 and 3 at Ann Hutch and Greenvale. I think our enrollments at the middle school are holding steady and are in a sweet spot, as well as the high school. There are some under-enrolled classes at the high school that I want to take a look at, some specialized AP courses that are under 10, and I want to look with the high school administration at some ways that we might be able to generate more students for those particular courses for next year, or some other alternative way of offering those courses. Some districts, when you get into very select courses, tend to look at offering them alternate years, so that if I know I'm going to be in a high school for 4 years and I want to pick anything you want, AP Calculus BC, which is the highest you can go in math. Now there we tend to have good numbers, so very happy, but let's assume you only had 8 one year and 8 the next. You can project forward and have only one section where we combine your juniors and your seniors. So that's a way of low enrollment classes, not eliminating them, but maintaining them, but maybe on an alternate year arrangement. Gotcha. We're not there yet, but it's something that we could do in the event that we had to do it.
Sure.
Okay. So let's talk district-wide initiatives.
Yeah, of course, district and secondary initiatives and district-wide initiatives, absolutely.
So I think it's important that this year we started a major investment in student and staff mental health. Some wonderful things have happened. We appointed Dr. Bill Meyer, an assistant to the superintendent, who has done an enormous amount of work with Ruler and Panorama in terms of survey work, has done a lot of work with our school counselors in terms of investing in our students at the high school and the middle and elementary on the mental health spectrum. So we want to continue that work. And one exciting advance we're looking at with some additional funding from outside the district through a couple of sources. We got ourselves involved 3 years ago in a BOCES grant, which we were successful in together with 10 other districts. And we're getting $2.2 million over 3 years. So we're participating in some of those funds. And some money from that grant, the RECUBS grant, together with some monies that we're getting from the county, we're able to establish a student research center on our secondary campus. Now, what does that mean? It means that with some money from ourselves, about $36,000, and about $45,000 in grant money, we are able to get a full-time social worker who will be on campus 5 days a week. And we're also able to sponsor some unique programs in the Student Research Center and be able to allow our own students through the WISE program and other programs, advanced placement, et cetera, an opportunity to do some research, papers, further investigation in areas of mental health, social emotional learning, examination of data on Panorama, making comparisons in terms of growth, et cetera. So it could be a very exciting venture that is linked mental health and student research and learning.
Absolutely. And one of the very nice things to have you back on this podcast is last year you went over the strategic priorities on the calendar 23-24 year. Mental health, social emotional learning was a big initiative that you've, oversaw and really strive to put into place here in Eastchester and to continue to grow. And this is one of the nice things about, seeing it grow from year to year, because where we're at right now, it's truly incredible to see the progress that, the entire district has had in mental health, the kids' social emotional learning. I've had Dr. Meyer on the podcast, and with all of what is going on, I had to bring him back a second time, and I'm still trying to edit it because that's how immersive we have gone and how much work he's doing. But this has been unbelievable.
Right. I personally observed a school psychologist in a kindergarten environment. And there were 2 students there working with the psychologist. And I personally observed the Ruler program at work, where students are able at that very tender level of kindergarten and first grade to be able to answer a question, well, how do you feel today? All right. And point to the color that best describes it. Are you angry or hot red?
The mood meter, I believe.
Mood meter, yes. So I think that's very important, to identify your emotions, to express your emotions, to be able to talk about them, and to be able to develop a plan as to getting to a better place with respect to regulating your emotions. Absolutely. So when you see that working at the youngest level, and that's the Yale Ruler program that we've introduced, we're in the right spot on that.
100%. And I think that's another thing too, where people are going to see the results. I mean, they're already seeing the results now, but that's only going to grow exponentially when the kids who are receiving that social emotional learning help at a young age, by the time they're, in high school and in middle school, it's really going to pay dividends to them, and their learning experience is going to be that much better.
Yep.
Yeah. So
you bet.
Incredible.
One other thing I want to mention about district-wide initiatives, this has to do with our pupil personnel services. I did mention some additional special education teachers, and we're looking to bring one additional teacher into the secondary level. for all the good reasons in the world, for a co-teaching model. Now, what is co-teaching? It means you put a general and a special ed teacher together for a group of youngsters who are going to confront demanding content. Now, what does that mean? We're pushing more of our students into higher level courses. There is no law that says special needs pupils or students who may not necessarily be performing at a proficient range shouldn't be challenged with higher level courses, all right? When I arrived here 3 years ago, only 40% of our 8th graders were in Regents algebra. Think about that, 40%. Only 40% were in Regents earth science. Now, that's not uncommon. When I took over in Harrison, where I spent 10 years as superintendent, it was divided into thirds. 1/3 honors, 1/3 Regents, 1/3 general. I always found that an interesting fractional division, okay? Yeah. A certain designation of who falls into what category. We need to break that mold. And we did it at our Eastchester Middle School. We now have close to 70% as opposed to 40 in earth science algebra, in the earth science and algebra Regents courses. So think about the number growth, first of all. Think about the fact that these kids are still acing the Regents tests. Now, they're not getting 100, but who cares? If you're scoring in the mid-80s, high 80s, low 90s, you're passing, right? Yep. Even if you're in the 70s, you're passing. Yep. But this is a group of youngsters that educators in general, not just here or in New York or nationally, educators were not necessarily interested in bringing into higher level courses because they were not performing at the level that they felt they should. If you give these youngsters support, like a co-teaching model, like we are with additional classes or labs at the middle school, they will succeed. Yeah. They just need added supports. So we're willing to add another special ed teacher so that more youngsters can be brought into higher level courses. The fact that we put in the Regents level as a baseline, right, fail-safe option for everybody. We put in the Regents level courses at the middle school, now for 70%. I'd love to see that get to 90 to 95 eventually, and use the co-teacher model. That has a domino effect. So if I'm an 8th grader taking algebra, when I go to 9th grade, I could take geometry. But if I need extra help, maybe it would be in that co-teaching model. Right. And when I get to 10th grade, I can take Algebra 2 trig. Yeah. All right. Do you see the progression? Oh, 100%. And maybe even tackle an AP course. Right. So you're allowing students to get into tracks that they never were in before. Yeah. And I think we ought to disband all non-Regents courses. I really think that the only group of students are those who are alternatively assessed. Certainly they need special individualized attention, but I would say that 90% of our students should be in challenging courses. I don't think any student should graduate from Eastchester without having at least one AP course.
Right.
All right? Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? I mean, what is it about AP that is so sacred that we can't open it up to more students?
Of course. And I remember we did speak about that last year, too, on the podcast, and that was a big initiative that has also been successfully introduced in your tenure, where new APs have been birthed every single year.
Yep.
Let me just ask you a quick question on the advantages of that. I know you spoke about the advantages. That was news to me, how well most of the kids score on the tests in these advanced courses, which is incredible. But let me ask you, because, right, how many people, and I don't know why it's so sacred, and I don't know, maybe a lot of parents feel as if, well, I know my kid's not ready, et cetera, and whatnot. You know, you've seen a lot of different settings in education and public education in New York. You strongly feel, with all of your experience, that kids, if they are introduced to those classes, more of them than not will score pretty well.
Yes. Okay. Yes, with the proper supports, all right? Gotcha. Now, not every student, all right? You always have to say that the exception would prove the rule in this case. I had one parent come to me when we introduced the algebra for the first year and say, look, my child intellectually can do it, but gets very tense in terms of being challenged too much or having to take certain exams. And I said, well, then it might be better that your child is in the regular 8th grade math. So there are emotional overlays here that are important, but if a child is comfortable taking more difficult work, then why don't we push them in that direction? Don't forget, the normal adolescent would say, I'm happy. Don't push too hard, right? It's our job to start pushing a little bit. We're preparing them for a competitive world. So I don't want them to be too complacent or comfortable either if they're able to do the work. All right? So stretching people, pushing them, I think, is what it's all about.
I'm in complete agreement. I tell the kids that I direct in the Players Club,
there you go.
We're doing the show this year, and they look at me and they're like, no, we're not. I'm like, yes, we are, and you're going to be great. And
and that's a great example from theater. I'll give you a lot of examples from athletics, where when you start pushing students, they're able to perform above their own expectations.
Of course.
And the same is true for academics.
Absolutely. But I'm happy that you said that, though, because quite frankly, Dr. Valenti, it's a world of difference where you're saying that you've seen the kids do better. Because, look, if I was interviewing a first-year rookie superintendent and they thought that way, you know, someone could say, well, do they have the experience to back it up? For you to have said that is, I think, very important to reassure parents that, you know, most students will succeed with the right support that they're getting.
No, I have years of experience to prove it. In the Harrison situation, where I was 10 years, we managed to move that fractional relationship, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, to many more students out of the general course, into the Regents, and more into the honors. So it was more of 45, 45, 10, as opposed to 30, 30, 30.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, and there's so much untapped potential where you're right. The kids almost need that, just the iceberg tipped for sure.
Yeah. And look, on an AP exam, it's wonderful to get 5, right? But 3 will get you where you want to be. Yeah. And in talking to deans at different universities, and I'm thinking of one particular, I won't get too specific, a conversation I had only recently, the dean said to me, look, when I'm looking at students' transcripts, if I see one AP that student tried, and I know that made an effort on it, and I know that the school offered several APs, but this student did at least take one, I want to take a look at that student, all right? Because that student is saying something to me as a dean, all right, or for college counselors. So it helps from a transcript point of view as well.
And while you were saying that, it just made me think of, too, one of the most important things, if you're going to take a lot of APs, it helps from a cost perspective, too. My cousin, one of my cousins, went to Clemson, and he had so many APs under his belt, he graduated in 3 years.
There you go.
So an entire year of tuition.
There you go. Yep. And we offer enough APs where some of our students could do that.
Do you want to go to K-12 restructuring?
Yeah, let's go to K-12 restructuring. And what I'll say there is a term I'm using, restructuring or resource reallocation. In a nutshell, we are spending monies we are spending monies for central administrators, and I'd like to shift some of those monies down into the schools. So I looked very closely at our business department. I looked very closely at our human resources and very closely at our curriculum and instruction departments And we were able to realize some reductions and looking at maybe in the neighborhood of $400,000 to $500,000 in savings that we could redirect to the elementary level. Now, what is the evidence and the research behind that? We believe, and the evidence and the research proves, that building level leadership teams, your principal, your assistant principal, and those who support that work, literacy coach, math coach, your MTSS, multi-tiered support system staff, your AIS staff, your counselor, those form a team at each building, whether it's Waverly or Ann Hutch or Greenvale. And they should own students' improvement in academics and in social emotional and in all areas in the performing arts, etc. It's those teams that should be driving it. It shouldn't be somebody sitting in central administration who's ratcheting up student scores. Now, we can give direction from central, we could set targets, we could provide support, we could be there in the buildings to some degree, helping out, but we really need more people in the classrooms. So in restructuring or reallocation, we're taking monies, as I said, from central, and we're investing in positions. Just start with the elementary level. I mentioned every school will have now a literacy coach, someone totally dedicated to working with our teachers at Waverly, Ann Hutch, and Greenvale, just focusing on the science of reading, modeling lessons, helping teachers improve their art, their science, their work. We're doing the same for math because ELA and math are at the heart of the matter. And we're determined to get our students to 80% or better in terms of proficiency there. So we're investing a lot. We're adding 0.6 of a literacy coach at Waverly to bring it at the full time. We're adding 3 math coaches, 1 at each elementary school, in order to bring math up to where we want it to be. And at the middle school, they don't have chairs right now. And I've always wondered, well, the high school has 9 to 12 chairs, grades 9 to 12, in major subject areas. The middle school did not. So I'm introducing, and certainly Madeline and her team strongly support it, middle school chairs, English, science, social studies, and also in special ed, all right? So we do want our middle school to be strengthened. So with math STEM coaches at the elementary level, new, literacy coaches in each elementary school, full-time now and new, likewise, and with chairs in the major subject areas, we are really strengthening our school and building effort. Yeah. On top of that, it is time for some district-wide chairs. Now, what do I mean? We've been growing our performing and our visual arts program over the last 3 years. You're a witness to that. I have elementary principals singing hosannas to the great things that are happening in elementary music, performing arts. We had a group from Greenvale just the other day perform at our board meeting, right?
First ever Greenvale show.
Okay. So we're doing it.
Yeah.
We're doing it.
Absolutely.
Are we creating a pathway into the middle school, into the high school? I think if you have a chair dedicated to the performing arts and a chair dedicated to the visual arts, you're going to see a lot more in terms of performances, exhibitions, and all of the increases in student participation in programs that would then lead to a stronger secondary program. So you're in the arts yourself, you know that, so you'd be a major beneficiary of this. But those chairs are important, and then a chair for ELLs, English language learners. So that's where we're investing in new positions and where we're eliminating certain positions at the district level in order to help provide for that investment. That really is a short way of describing the restructuring and reallocation effort.
With everything else that you're introducing, that connectivity within whatever field where there would be a chair, that would be tremendously beneficial. In the world today, in my opinion, it's not just in academics, it's everywhere. And it's fascinating to me because you would think the communication in the world would never be more crystal clear. But in so many ways, it's in a way gotten, like, it's eroded from how many avenues there are now to communicate, for how isolated people might be doing one thing, and et cetera. So these chair positions, they're going to make a world of difference.
There's a connectedness there that we don't have right now. And my thinking on the chairs, the district-wide chairs, is that they would be point A teaching and point 2, I want to see them in the different schools. If you want to be a chair, I want to see you in Waverly one day, meeting with the faculty, arts, visual, whatever. I want to see you in Greenvale another day, and Hutch a third, and then in the middle in the high school where you probably would be located. But you've got to move around town, so to speak, and make sure that those art, music, and related teachers feel supported by virtue of this.
Absolutely. No, of course.
So I could talk a little bit more about the elementary and some of the initiatives there. We did mention that we are adding some classroom positions. On top of that, something that we think is very important is really no cost, and I'll explain why. We want to add 2 specialized reading positions. That means teachers who have a literacy background, special ed background, Orton Gillingham or Wilson training, and we want to put them into our Ann Hutch and Greenvale School. Why? Well, first of all, the need is there. Secondly, the district has sustained certain suits of not providing adequate reading for failing youngsters, and we believe these 2 specialists will help. Why do I say at no cost? Well, we're eliminating 1 special ed position at Ann Hutch, so we're able to hire this position at no additional cost, right? At Greenvale, we're able to put this particular specialized teacher under a grant. So it's not coming from the general fund, the taxpayer. It would be coming from the taxpayer in a different venue through federal funding. So those are 2 initiatives that we think are very important. We also want to provide a program through the WIN period called the Advanced Learning Program. Right now, we have a number of our students at the proficient and above level, mastery level, who are not necessarily getting a coherent curriculum. They're getting good stuff. I'm not knocking what's happening. But in terms of coherence and a systematic curriculum, I'd like to see us hire a full-time advanced learning program teacher, half at Greenvale, half at Ann Hutch. So the teacher would spend 3 days in a 6-day cycle at one school, 3 days at the other, be responsible for developing a coherent curriculum and delivering that curriculum to all students in the WIN period who would be in need of this, grades 2, 3, 4, and 5. We do provide in WIN for the 3 buckets, what we call the 3 buckets. 1, occupational therapy, speech therapy for special need pupils. The other for remedial students, academic intervention, ELA, math. This would be the 3rd bucket, ALP, for students who don't qualify for those programs. And it would complement the junior grade books program that we've already introduced that has been well received this year, both at Waverly and at Ann Hutch. So with the ALP teacher on top of the specialized reading teachers, we think we're bringing the elementary up to a very powerful level next year at all 3 schools.
That sounds wonderful.
The last part of the budget well, I shouldn't say the last part. You wanted to talk a little bit about technology.
Yes.
So let's take a look at technology.
You know, it's funny too. So I just finished an Inside the Classroom on digital citizenship in the middle school, and it's an incredible class where, right, and students are learning all the ethics and morals about how to be a citizen online and in the digital world. And not only from an academic perspective, where that class is so important from a technology standpoint, educating the students, but the class looks beautiful. And one of the new boards that Rob took a big initiative and the tech team to make sure that every class had these new smart boards, the board is unbelievable. So I see it in real time, the improvements with technology.
Well, you want to tell the listener what unbelievable means? You're a great, resource on this.
Well, of course, absolutely, yeah. That's what it is. The technology has improved, and also too, right? We have this podcast because you took a big initiative to make sure that the technology and the communication would go out to the district. So
every classroom in this district, and you've been in many of them, I'm sure, whether it's kindergarten or upper elementary or middle or high, has certain things, right? The smart board.
Yep.
Certain technologies, one-to-one devices, et cetera. There's always room to grow, and I know Rob is investing as we go forward in the Apple computer, if I'm not mistaken. Is that
I think so. I don't want to speak for him, but something's coming down the road.
Right. And the big issue that we want to look at is the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, our IP public address system in every school needs to be looked at. You're here at the middle high school. There are lapses sometimes in terms of the effectiveness of the system.
Yes.
And that in itself would be $4.2 million in order to bring it up to standard where it should be. Now, you don't put that in a budget.
So then where does it come from?
Well, two ways that a community could look at. You could have a separate, what I call capital reserve bond, just for technology.
Okay.
All right? But I don't want to just talk technology because I meet with the athletic people too. And they've got their own wants in certain areas, but maybe someday we could talk about that end. But in technology, we've been showing in the budget the public address system, 4.2. What about a wireless and network switch renovation? Now, that may not sound too exciting, but it's got to be done.
Right.
Unless you have the requisite switches. You're more into technology than I am.
Right. No, well, you're totally right. And one of the things about the technology that we're speaking about, and I'll make two examples of it, I don't think people understand how much of an impact it makes, one, on learning. So the new smart boards, and when the new smart boards were coming in, I was a little ignorant to the functionality and, how much of a necessity it is. Seeing it in the classroom, how movable it is, how much it can do, how much smarter it is than the previous version of the smart board.
Exactly.
It really makes a world of difference in the learning. Teachers are able to teach without any interruptions. And if there were interruptions or a big interruption, well, guess what's going next? A student's attention span. And then everything just kind of, falls down from that. And the fact that the technology with the smart boards, you're just able to maintain a certain flow with what you're teaching and how much you're able to do now. Again, I'm filming it in real time. So, yeah, it makes a big difference. The PA system, from a safety perspective,
right.
Absolutely. I mean, right? That's how the building's informed about a lockdown or a hold in place. So that is absolutely a necessity. And
recabling and the switches and the recabling, bring yourself up to modern speeds.
Of course, and the other thing too, when I tell people who, either friends or family haven't been in education in a minute, I say to them, every student has a laptop now. Like, there's no notebooks. I mean, there are, but they're mostly laptops. And if the Wi-Fi goes out or the switches aren't working,
yeah.
Yep.
Houston, we have a problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And to get back to the smart boards, I mean, think where we've come from. We had the old-fashioned chalkboards. Remember them?
Oh, yeah.
With the eraser, et cetera, and the chalk dust.
And the noise that would pierce your ears, yeah.
Screeching. Then we moved to what we call whiteboards. Okay, which are okay. They were cleaner, and you'd write on them and erase. The smartboard, when you use that as a teacher, and I do some graduate teaching, you have the capacity not only to write on the board, you have the capacity to bring YouTube onto and show video there. Yep. You have capacities to have multiple levels of information you can bring up on a smartboard using your computer in tandem with it. So really, this is where we all need to be in the 21st century, all right?
Absolutely.
And we now have one in every classroom, right? But that's step one. Right. Step two is making sure that we have the speed, making sure that we have the capacity to let these be at full power and full efficacy with students.
Kids, with whatever their device is, if they're able to write on it, or at least the teacher's able to write on their device, and it's writing on the smartboard when they're away from it, sitting down at a desk, like it's connected to it.
You can export it and import it.
Yes, but if I write something on my iPad, it's going to pop up on the smartboard.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah, the efficiency is really second to none what's going on here.
So that's the short story, I guess, of where we want to be in technology. We are making investments, obviously, for next year, and there's always room to grow, but there's a much larger set of projects out there. And K-12 athletics, let's not forget athletics. Yep, they very much, appreciate the fact that we're looking to expand the secretary, who has been a constant through the multiple changes that we've had in our director of PE, HE, and athletics. By the way, Michael Ramponi will be joining us on Monday, Great. March 17th. And so we're going to have a full-time AD coming here from Ardsley, has 9 years of experience as the director of physical health and athletics. So we're very excited about that. He will have a full-time secretary now, 12 months as opposed to 10 months. Okay. And we've expanded our athletic trainer to 12 months as well. There's a lot that goes on here, July and August. Oh, yeah. All right, an awful lot in the athletic field, as you well know. You're around yourself, as am I. So we want to be sure we're covering all the bases with both the secretary and the athletic trainer. And then we have to keep adding sports. We need more sports, particularly for our girls. And Michael has a reputation out of Ardsley for doing good things there. We've put money in the budget to ensure that we are able to bring up varsity and junior varsity teams if the room allows, right, if we have sufficient facilities, et cetera. Right. And that's where you can start talking about another $15 million that the athletic folks would love to see if you want lights on the field and if you want additional fields at Greenvale and Ann Hutch and if you want expanded facilities. All of that serves the purpose of more sports. Sure. But we do want to add to the middle school for next year in terms of conditioning, and that worked very well at the high school, so we're going to have a conditioning coach there as well. And we've added certain other sports, girls flag football, okay? Yeah. Just the other night we announced that. So we're very much committed to expanding our student sports. And the more extracurriculars our students have and the more creative, inspiring, and challenging our academic program is, I think that really makes for a great school system and allows our students maximum 100% opportunity to grow.
You're completely on point. I couldn't agree more. When I again, right, having gone through the school district and having had two siblings that have gone through the entirety of the school district, I never thought that it could be better than when I was here, even though when you're a kid, you don't realize what you have and sometimes you take it for granted. But, now being back here to see how this place has innovated and moved on. Specifically in your time, sir, it truly is. It's everything that you just said you want it to be.
Yeah. It's been a great run. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And the last slide is a timeline of future dates that I'm sure you'll show. And as I said at the beginning, if we want to have another podcast, the Q&A, that's one way of reconnecting with our audience. Definitely the streaming on those dates that you have in front of you, or attending budget sessions, and the messages that we do send out and put on the website now on a weekly basis about the budget. No one in Eastchester should be able to say, I don't know what the budget's all about.
Right.
All right. You're being inundated from so many different media and so many different ways, shapes, and forms that you have to hear about it.
The last thing I actually wanted to ask you was just about athletics. Is there a specific piece of infrastructure within athletics that is in the budget to be either renovated or built for next year?
Well, we're looking at some work that we want to do in the conditioning area, expanding our conditioning area. And there is some work we'd like to do through the maintenance code, the 1600 code, in terms of improving one of our locker room areas and recreating that into an internal gym. But those are minor. Those are small projects. Generally, your regular budget is able to do small projects well. When you want to do medium and large-size projects, like, you want to change all the cameras in the district, that becomes now a major project. And it either calls out for a repair reserve fund, which would be a special bond, mini bond we call them, or a capital bond that you package together a number of areas. So there are different ways to bring about, the improvements that you want, different buckets. The budget, the reserve fund, capital projects. And then if you keep enough money in your own reserves, and you do have monies that are left over at the end of the year, we did this in my first year here. We put together about $1.9 million and bought a lot of equipment on a lease purchase arrangement. You may remember that. We invested in a 5-year lease purchase arrangement, and we brought a lot of those smart boards and computers in the first year and pay for it over the next several years.
Dr. Valenti, is there anything else you would like to add to this?
Well, all I want to say to the Eastchester community is thank you for your generosity in the past. We look forward to your ongoing generosity come the May budget vote. And in my view, there's only one lever to pull, yes.
Fantastic. Folks, you heard it first from the superintendent himself. We're going to leave the budget timeline on the screen at the end of the podcast for a little bit for people to see the dates. If you have any questions, please attend the meetings, and we will explore another either possible podcast or something where community questions could be answered in the
follow up in any way.
Absolutely.
Be happy to do so.
Amazing. Dr. Valenti, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, great. All right.
Folks, see you next time. Thank you.